Corporate Finance Excel practice problem. In this presentation, we're going to work a practice problem in Excel related to the break-even point in interest rates, comparing and contrasting a situation where we have variable interest rates and what would be the break-even point if we had a fixed interest rate over that same time period. Get ready. It's time to take your chance with Corporate Finance. Here we are in Excel. We have the information on the left-hand side. We're going to put that into the blue area into our worksheet on the right-hand side. What we have over here is the financing needs for January through June. This is the amount of financing that is required. Then we have the projected annual interest rates for short-term financing. So this is what we think the interest rates will be for short-term financing. We will then calculate what our interest payments then will be for the short-term financing, and then think about the break-even point as if we had one interest rate, if we had a set rate, which would typically be more like long-term financing, or if we can lock down the rate for the same amount. We'll get to that break-even point, and then we'll kind of prove that that break-even point is indeed the case by calculating this thing in a similar fashion as we did up top. In other words, obviously, when we have these different rates that are going to be applied, then we have to do a little bit more complexity in our calculation of what the interest costs will be, because we have to calculate the interest rates separately for each time period, as opposed to when we have just one interest rate that we could then, it's a little bit more easier to calculate what the total interest would be, but then we'll break it into the same kind of format so you can see how it would look in the same format. All right. So we're going to first start off with our months. So I'm going to say this is going to be equal to, I'm going to pick up January over here, and then I'm just going to autofill that all the way down to June. So we're going to take that from January down to June, not yet to the bottom line, because that's going to be our total down here. This is going to be the total. And then we'll pick up the interest rates. So I'm going to say this will be equal to the interest rate of the 8% and enter. I'm going to put my cursor back on that now, go to the Home tab, Numbers group, and percentify it. And then we're going to copy that on down as well. So now that I have the formatting there, we can copy that down, putting our cursor on the autofill handle, dragging that on down to June. So there are our interest rates, mirroring the interest rates down here. And then we're going to be picking up, this is the yearly interest rate. And now we want to think about the monthly interest rate, which can be useful, or one way that we often think about how we're going to break down our payments. In other words, if I was to take a look at our payment, there's our giant calculator. Giant calculator gets excited when I pull out the calculator. It gets all big like that. But then we're going to say that we're going to have the 12,000. And if I multiply that times the 8%, 0.08, then that's going to be the 960. So the 960 would be for a year, because remember that the interest rates, whenever we say interest rates, we usually mean per year unless stated otherwise, as we are here stating it as a monthly rate. We could take that 960, that would be the interest for a year, divide it then by 12 to get the interest for a month, which would be the 80. We can get to that 80 another way by breaking down the interest rate to a monthly interest rate. So we could take this 0.08, 8%, or 0.08 divided by 12 months, would give us a monthly rate. Now, we don't usually use the monthly rate, because if I was to move the decimal place over 2 places, that would be 0.666. That would be a small number. That's why we typically, the custom is to say when we say interest rates, we typically mean per year unless stated otherwise. But it's useful to know that when we look at calculations in formulas, because you might see the formula broken down to a monthly rate, or they might calculate the interest first and then take the interest down to an interest per month. So if I think it's easier to see if you actually calculate the interest first, and then you don't have to deal with these small kind of rates, and then divide the interest that would be for a year divided by 12. But most equations will then break the rate down to a monthly rate. So you'll basically have to see it that way, and that's what we'll do here. We're going to take that. So this equals the 8%. I'm going to divide it then by 12 for the 12 months. That'll give us our monthly rate. I'm going to then percentify this, Home tab, Numbers group, percentifying that cell. I want to see a few more decimals, so I'm going to pick out a few more decimals. Again, it goes on forever. It's going to be 0.666 on forever. We're going to stop it. Let's stop it at two decimals out. So that's not 67%, that's 0.67 on a monthly rate and 8% on the yearly rate. All right, then if we pick up the amount, we're going to pick the amount up at the 12,000. We'll multiply this out. This will be the interest for 1 month then, which will be the 0.67, which is really, once again, 0.6666 times the 12%. Notice that if I was to use this, if I was to round it right there, 0.67. If I move the decimal 2 places over, then that would be 0.067. And if I multiply that times the 12,000, That's going to give us, let's do that one more time. We're going to say 0.0067 times 12,000. That's going to give us something a little bit different than the 80, right? The 80.4. It would round down, but notice there's going to be rounding involved. So that number, which Excel really knows, is actually, if I move the decimal 2 places over, it's 0.0066666666 on forever, right? And if I do that times the 12,000, then I'm going to get closer to the $80. So notice Excel's picking up the actual number, even though it's only showing the 0.67%. And remember, it's 0.67%, decimal format being 0.0067. Okay, so then let's do it for the second month of February. 9% divided by 12. Now I could copy this down, but I want to do this a few times just to practice, because this is the point, to practice this monthly rate and the yearly rate and whatnot. So I'm going to go to the Home tab, Numbers, going to percentify this, going to add some decimals. So there we have it. We could keep going. It looks like it is rounded, or it goes to 0.75%. Then we can multiply this out. We're going to take the amount then, 6,000. Then we can multiply this out. This is going to be the 0.75% times the 6,000, getting us to $45. Okay, and then we're going to go to March, which is going to be equal to the 12% divided by 12. Then let's percentify this, go into the Home tab, Numbers group, making a percent, and then adding a few decimals. So now we've got the 1%. And then we're going to pick up the amount, which is going to be the amount of the loan, 7,000 for March. And then let's multiply this out. Obviously, the 1% times the 7,000 is going to be 70. And then if we go into April, this is going to be equal to the 15% divided by 12. Percentifying this, going to the Home tab, Numbers group, making it a percent, adding a few decimals. We're at the 1.25. And then we're going to pick up the amount in April, which is the 12,000. Multiply this out. This is going to be the 1.25 times the 12,000. That's going to be the 150. Then I'm going to go to May. This is going to be equal to the 11% divided by 12. Percentify this. Home tab, Numbers, percentify. Add a few decimals. We're at the 0.92. We're then going to pick up the amount, which is 13,000. And then notice it calculated this for us, the 0.92% times the 13,000. One more time, we're going to take the 11% divided by 12. That's going to be percentified, Home tab, Numbers, percentify. Add a couple decimals. We're back to that 0.92%. Then we'll pick up the amount at the 8,000, and then it multiplied it out for us. Now note, of course, we can do this a lot more quickly. If we were to just have done this first item, I'll do this first row and delete this and just do this with an autofill. We could have done this with an autofill. We already formatted the cell, so we could then select these three once we do one column and then use the autofill handle to simply drag down. And then I would double check to make sure it does what we would expect. It's taking that divided by 12. It's multiplying, or it's picking up the amount. That's correct. And then we're going to multiply that out. I'd also like to add a few decimals over here to the interest. Let's pick up a few decimals. I'm going to select these items, Home tab, Numbers, and I'll add a few decimals. And it does look like we have some pennies involved here in May and June. Let's then sum this up. I'm going to say this equals the sum of, we'll add these items up. Let's put an underline here. We're going to put the underline. So that's going to be our financing or interest. Let's sum these up as well to consider our total amount that is financed. And we'll put an underline here as well. All right, so now let's consider our break-even annual rate. What the break-even annual rate. So let's take our short-term financing interest, which is going to be equal to that 537.5. And then we're going to divide that by the total amount financed. Actually, let's move this over here. Let's move this over to here so we can see the text. Okay, and then we're going to take the total amount financed, which was, at the end of the day, the 58,000. So if I put an underline here, Home tab, Font group, and underline, that's going to give us the break-even monthly rate. Let's divide this out. This is going to be equal to the 538 divided by the 58,000. I'm going to percentify this, going to the Home tab, Numbers group, percentifying it, adding a few decimals. We could keep on going. I'm going to stop at 2 for the 0.93. So there's the 0.93, and then if I want to get to the yearly rate, I can pick up the months in a year, which of course are 12, and that'll give us the break-even yearly rate, which would be the monthly rate now times 12. And then I'll percentify this, home tab numbers group, percentify it. We could add some decimals. So we're talking, if we think about the break-even rate, we would say it's 11.12. If you want to break that out into a monthly rate, you divide it by 12, and that would get you back to this 0.93 about. These are both rounded numbers. Now to prove that, we might want to just mirror this same schedule and just say, well, what would that work if I had these rates all being the same here, these rates all being the same, and these number amounts, we'll just work it out. So we'll have the same schedule. Let's just do the same schedule. This will be equal to the January number. I'm going to copy that down using autofill. I'm just going to copy that down, and then this is going to be the total. So this will be the total. Now let's go ahead and format paint the entire thing. That'll make it a little bit easier, so I'll have the percents there and everything we need. Let's take this entire thing and then go to the Home tab, Clipboard, and Format Paint it, and that'll do the formatting for us so we don't have to do it as we go. I'll click the top cell. That should format everything so we can just autofill this thing in. And then we want to pick up the yearly rate, which is going to be the 11.12. Now, I want to add a couple decimals here to pick that up because this one has a few decimals. Let's go to the Home tab, Numbers, add a couple decimals there. Now, I could copy that down by making that an absolute reference. So we could double click on this and say I'd like to put an F4 here because it's going to be the same all the way down. And then autofill that down. And that should pick up the same cell. And that's probably the more appropriate way, or the way most often used. But you can also, I also often do this, is say equals the one above it. And then I'm going to make that Home tab, Numbers, percentifying it. It's already percentified, and adding some decimals. Then I can autofill that down. And so now it's the same effect because it's always going to be the one above it. It's picking up the number from the one above it. And then the monthly rate, you can get two ways. We calculated the monthly rate up top, which is going to be this number. So we have it from there. Or you can calculate it as the yearly rates divided by 12. And that'll get you back to the monthly rate. Let's do that. That'll give you the same rate, and we can copy that down. So we'll autofill that down. So there we have that. Now the amount financed is going to be the same. So I'm going to pick this up from the amount financed column. That's going to be the same. Let's autofill that down. We're just going to simply autofill that one down. And then we'll multiply this across. This is going to be equal to the 0.93 about times the 12,000. And then we can autofill that down. So this is going to be the same rate all the way across. We autofill that down. And then if I was to sum this up, equals the sum, then are we going to get to the same interest is the point here, the 537.50, 537.50, right? So if we just used one rate then to approximate this whole thing, the rate would be this 11.12 about. Let's go ahead and sum this one up as well, equals the sum. And let's put an underline here. We're going to go to the Home tab, Font group, and underline. So there we have it, the 537.50 using the one kind of fixed rate over this schedule, and the 537.50 at the approximated rates for the short-term financing.